Hello, my second graders. Here is an example of Paul Klee's work that we're going to be using as inspiration. From here, you should have already watched the Maddie and Dada video about Paul Klee. And now we're going to kind of talk about it, I guess, or I'm going to talk to you about it. And this is an image called Castle and Sun. And when you kind of look at it, at first, a lot of students see buildings or a castle, and they see that round sun in there. We also see a lot of lines and shapes and colors. Those are art elements. And if you're watching this, you're probably in my virtual classroom, and on the home screen behind my head, there's some posters. And one of them is the elements of art. Every single work of art is either made up of one art element, all of them, or a couple of them. But every single work of art is made up of the art elements. And Klee really used in this particular one shape, line, and color, which is what we're going to focus on. Additionally, when you were watching the video, the Maddie and Dada video, you probably heard two of the vocabulary words that kind of want us to focus on with this project, and that is balance and composition. So if you are kind of sitting there going, what? Balance and composition? I don't remember hearing that. Go back and watch it a little bit and listen and look for how Klee used balance and composition in his pictures. In one, the cat and the bird, you can kind of see where he's drawing it in the air. And when he draws one eye, the eye starts to like lift up one way, and then he draws the other one and they start to balance out, and then he draws one side of the head and it starts to lean one way because it's kind of heavy, and then he draws the other part of the cat and it balances out. And so that's what we really want to focus on our picture, is creating a balanced composition. And remember, in the video, it doesn't necessarily mean that what's on one side is exactly the same as what's on the other. It just means that it looks unified and finished and balanced. And then the other word, composition, that's another way of saying a picture. Compositions can also, the word can also be used in music. If you think of a musical piece or a musical song, the person who wrote that created a composition. And if they just started throwing notes together, it wouldn't really sound necessarily like music. It would just sort of sound like noise. And so by balancing out the music notes, you get a balanced composition, a nice balanced song. And the same is true in visual art. We want to create this visual balance in our composition. Here's some student examples. And as you can see, we got balanced compositions, we've got colors, and we've got lines. In some of these, the students decided to use very straight lines the whole time. And then in some, they decided to use some wavy lines, just a little bit more on the what's called organic side. After you're done drawing and tracing out your picture, then we're going to color it in. And how you decide to use your colors can really change the balance of your composition, because if you're going to use all blue on one side, for example, like all your shapes next to each other are blue, well, it can kind of unbalance your composition, and it can sort of muddle up your shapes and sort of make them disappear because all of them are the same color next to each other. So when we're coloring in our pictures, kind of think about having different colors next to each other. And here are just some color families. For example, you have the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue. So you could make your, like one building, all the primary colors, and the one next to it, you could make all secondary colors. You could do the buildings in warm colors, and then the background in cool colors. We could do complementary colors, which are colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. It's kind of up to you how you want to use your colors, but definitely be aware of them, though, that by the time you get to the coloring, we're not just throwing color on wherever. We want to still continue to create that balanced composition. And here's one of the ways that we can do that with color, not just with the color family, but also color variations. And we're going to talk about saturation. That's another one of our vocabulary words for this project. So we've got balance, composition, and now saturation. And I've used some sentences as an example of what saturation means. Drink of water. So the sentence, the sponge was so saturated that it couldn't hold any more water. By the sound of that, that means that there's a sponge and you've soaked up so much water. It is full of water that if you added one more drop, it would just roll off. That means that the sponge is saturated with water. It's full of water. Well, the same can be true in color. When you draw with a marker and ink, for example, that color is at full saturation. So the sentence, the color was so saturated that it couldn't be any more red. That means that if you had a marker and you were coloring with red and you just kept coloring, it's not going to be any more red. It's not going to be lighter or darker. It's at full saturation. However, if you're using something like crayons, if you press down hard, you're going to get a high saturation and full saturation. And if you're pressing down lightly, you're going to get a lighter saturation. So you can bring that into your picture. In the next video, I'm going to show you some examples of how to create that saturation.